Did you ever want to read a novel where the protagonist could level up, earn XP, gain loot, and struggle with existential dread? Me neither. But then I hadn't read Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman yet either. Who am I? I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I want to talk about LitRPG because I have avoided that subgenre for a long time because, frankly, it sounded kind of silly. And I should have been that target audience because I was a game designer and producer for 15 years for a commercial online game. But it wasn't until this year that I finally picked up Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I was hooked. Hooked! It has become one of my favorite comfort reads. But what is LitRPG? The more I've looked into this latest subgenre, the more interesting I've found it. First, it is a subgenre of a subgenre. The umbrella for any book in gaming is called gamelit. Examples of gamelit can be found going way back to the start of Dungeons & Dragons. Quag Keep by Andre Norton, published in 1978, was based on a gaming session Andre Norton had with Dungeons & Dragons creator Gary Gygax. And then there's Dream Park by Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes, published in 1981. And since then, there's been a fair amount of books based on gaming worlds. But LitRPG is a little bit more specific because it uses the mechanics of MMORPGs as part of the storytelling. MMORPG stands for Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Games. Think of World of Warcraft, EverQuest, that type of thing where you quest in a fantasy world with thousands of other players, leveling up, and so on. The most intense part of these games is when PK happens. PK stands for player killing. Trust me, creating rules and boundaries for PK can get really sticky for game producers because, for some reason, certain players turn into psychopaths when they go online. Anyway, so I was looking into the history of LitRPG, and apparently it started in Russia. Yeah, that kind of surprised me too. Blame it on me being so American, I just sort of assumed it started over here. But people may not realize that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the PC gaming culture in Russia exploded. So in 2013, Vasily Mahanenko published Way of the Shaman, and Dmitry Rus published Play to Live, which mixed fantasy stories with gaming logic that you would find in simulations, including economic systems, crafting table, mob spawning, and so on and so forth, just like you would find in any other MMORPG. So, what exactly is the difference between LitRPG and GameLit or any other literature? In LitRPG, you see the actual mechanics of gameplay as part of the prose. You'll see when the characters level up, what their stats are, like intelligence, strength, agility, that sort of thing. If a character gains skill points, do they get to distribute them? How does that work? What type of experience do they get from killing certain monsters or for killing other players? Now, if you are a gamer, you know exactly how satisfying it is to progress in a game. Not just progressing through a story or a quest, but progressing your character, leveling him or her up, getting new skills and talents or whatever. It is so satisfying. And I know this. I'm a gamer, and like I said, I was a game designer and producer, but for some reason, I didn't think that would translate into a novel. It just seemed weird to me, which is why I never bothered to pick up a LitRPG novel, and I don't think I was alone in that, because most of the early LitRPGs were self-published because it was such a niche audience. But then along came Matt Dinniman, who, like all LitRPG writers at that time, self-published his novel. Dungeon Crawler Carl came out in 2020. Then, bang, it was a huge hit. Then he was approached by Ace Books to traditionally publish Dungeon Crawler Carl, and now, just 5 years later, there are 7 books out, and it's one of the most popular series out right now. So I finally read the first book and was immediately addicted and picked up the next book, and now I'm trying to ration them out, so I'll read them only when I find myself in a reading slump because they really do pick me up. They are so good. Now, I wonder if someone who isn't a gamer would like these books. I think so because good storytelling is good storytelling, but I don't know. Maybe some of the gaming mechanics that is in the prose will throw people off who aren't gamers. I'm honestly curious. So let me know down in the comments if you are someone or know someone who isn't a gamer who's enjoyed these books or who's read these books. I'm genuinely curious. So, what is Dungeon Crawler Carl? It may shock you to find out that it is science fiction, not fantasy. I know the covers and the title may suggest fantasy, but it's definitely science fiction. Actually, I find the Dungeon Crawler Carl books very similar to, or at least highly inspired by Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. First, the openings between the two books are extremely similar. In Hitchhiker's Guide, the Earth is destroyed by aliens to make a highway. In Dungeon Crawler Carl, the Earth is turned into an entertainment show for aliens, throwing survivors of an alien takeover into a massive dungeon. In Hitchhiker's Guide, you get occasional little excerpts from the Encyclopedia Galactica, which are funny, informative, and often satirical. In Dungeon Crawler Carl, you get the same thing, but in the form of tooltips or pop-ups. But let's go ahead and back up a second to tell you a little bit about this book. In Dungeon Crawler Carl, aliens come to Earth and kill all humans who are indoors. So everyone outdoors is still alive, and it's a smaller population, of course, and they are corralled into this underground dungeon. And they're forced to take part in this game for the entertainment of aliens who are watching all around the galaxy. Carl is one of the survivors, and he is barefoot and in his underwear. He was out looking for his cat, or his ex-girlfriend's cat, Princess Donut. And so both Carl and Princess Donut are forced into this game. And they have these visual interfaces, I guess, being projected into their minds, like you would see in many games that can bring up tooltips and inventory lists and so on. Princess Donut immediately gets a loot box that turns her into a super intelligent cat. But she's still a cat. Carl is still in his underwear and barefoot, and there's a lot of jokes that the computer game or computer AI has kind of a foot fetish. Of course, Princess Donut, being a cat, still considers herself a princess and allows Carl to join her in the royal court of Princess Donut. They have to build up their character levels, build their skills, because they have to survive the progressively harder levels in the dungeon that they are forced to question. And eventually, if they survive long enough, they'll be freed. They have to deal with mobs or monsters that range from the little teeny tiny up to the big boss level creatures. And of course, they have to deal with player killers. Now, this may be controversial, but I personally think Dungeon Crawler Carl is a better story than Hitchhiker's Guide insofar that both stories are funny, satirical, over-the-top, ridiculous, but for me, somehow, Dungeon Crawler Carl manages to also have a really moving character arc or progression for both Carl and Princess Donut. And I never found that for Arthur Dent or Ford Prefect. Also, what I find genius about Dungeon Crawler Carl is that, yes, we mostly are stuck in this weird gaming scenario, but remember I said this was science fiction and there were aliens. Occasionally, Carl and Princess Donut get pulled out of the game to go on these alien talk shows, and there are safe rooms where they meet their mentor, who is an alien who had survived a previous game, and talks about the situation, not just in the game, but in the context of the galaxy that has put them there. So we learn more and more about the aliens, why they set up these games, why the games exist, the contentious alien politics that are impacting Carl and Princess Donut. There's this whole other level of story that is going on simultaneously with their dungeon adventure. I'm telling you, these books are really good and addictive, like games are addictive. Now, there's actually a reason why gaming can be so addictive. There's a psychology term for it. Psychologists call it a compulsion loop, a reward cycle where action equals gain. Games exploit this, so do slot machines, so does TikTok, and weirdly, so too does LitRPG. If you've ever gamed before, there's something called grinding. Basically, grinding is when you kill a rat or small mob again and again and again just to raise your level. It sounds so boring when you describe it, but for me anyway, I always found grinding to be a little bit meditative, doing the same repetitious act over and over, and then getting a little rush when you actually do level up. So how does that work for LitRPG? Sometimes there's no epic battles or big plot twists or reveals. It's just their levels going up, gaining new skills, but it does seem to work. Why? Because the progression itself is the reward. Because in LitRPG, the numbers going up are part of the narrative. Anyway, I find it fascinating and have become a big fan of Dungeon Crawler Carl. But I want to know about you. Have you read or do you want to read any LitRPG? Are you a fan of Dungeon Crawler Carl? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.